Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. We begin with the latest splash from China. A military command center, the world's biggest, 10 times bigger than the Pentagon, with nuclear bunkers to protect the elite in case of war. Why and where is China building this military city? And how is the world reacting? We'll tell you all about it. In India, the economic survey is out a day before the budget day. It's basically a blueprint and the government's assessment of the economy, the status, the priorities, the challenges, all of it. We'll bring you the top highlights. In the US, Donald Trump has found the villain for every problem. Wildfires, inflation, plane collisions, he blames all of it on diversity hirings in the government. Meanwhile, his pick for FBI chief is being grilled by lawmakers. Who is Kash Patel, the Gujarati American who said Jai Shri Krishna in the US Congress? Why Mark Zuckerberg is complaining about leaks after happily snooping on the world for years and leaking private data to advertisers. How the West has launched a witch hunt on China's DeepSeek. Who is the Indian astronaut who's been picked for the next mission to the International Space Station? How Congo is falling to the Rwanda-backed M23 rebels who are now set to march towards the capital. Why China is painting furry dogs as tigers in its zoos. And why the LVMH top boss says if you're fired, you're basically promoted outwards. We'll discuss that. The headlines first. In India, opposition leader Sonia Gandhi sparks a row. The Congress leader calls President Draupadi Murmu a poor thing. While referring to the president's address to the parliament, Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls Sonia Gandhi's comment an insult. The president's office says it was in poor taste. New Delhi raises the issue of 3 missing Indians with Iran. They had reportedly gone there for business purposes. The Indian government says they are in touch with the authorities in Iran. New Delhi has requested Tehran to locate the missing nationals and ensure their safety. Norway seizes a Russian crude ship over its suspected involvement in damaging a Baltic Sea cable. The Norwegian-owned ship was held at Latvia's request. The vessel's owner denies any wrongdoing. In recent months, countries around the Baltic Sea have been on edge after a string of undersea outages. Myanmar's junta extends the emergency by 6 months as it struggles to contain the armed resistance to its rule. 4 years ago, the junta seized power, triggering a civil war that has claimed thousands of lives. This move will delay elections in Myanmar, which cannot be held under a state of emergency. Chad's president welcomes the departure of French troops from the country. This marks the end of France's last foothold in the wider Sahel region. Chad became independent in 1960. Since then, French troops and aircraft had been stationed in the Central African country. And Sri Lanka records its highest deflation in 65 years. Consumer prices fall by 4% in January. It's the 5th consecutive month of deflation. The island nation is slowly emerging from its worst economic meltdown. At the height of the crisis in 2022, inflation hit nearly 70%. China is preparing for war. It is building an entire city for this purpose, about 30 kilometers southwest of Beijing. A new military complex is coming up. They're calling it the Beijing Military City. Construction is already underway, and like most things Chinese, the scale is dramatic. It's a massive facility, some 1,500 acres in size, that is 10 times bigger than the Pentagon. The Pentagon, as you would know, is the headquarters of the US Defense Department. It is effectively the American Defense Ministry. Going by some claims, the Pentagon is larger than 100 American football fields. And Beijing's military city will be 10 times bigger than that. So you can imagine the scale. This is said to be the world's largest military command center, and it's going to be an underground facility complete with large and hardened bunkers and deep underground tunneling. Heavily reinforced concrete is being used for construction. They say it will be a foolproof facility, one that can survive even a nuclear attack. China is making sure of that, of surviving nuclear attacks and strikes from powerful American weapons like the famous bunker buster munitions. So this facility would have everything that the Chinese military and its commander-in-chief Xi Jinping may need. He could practically run a war out of there. Observers agree with this assessment. They say this complex is set to become China's wartime command center. It can replace the existing Western Hills complex. That's a Cold War era facility. It is China's existing wartime headquarters. This one is near Beijing. So why does China want a bigger complex now? Because it wants to be seen as a major military power. It wants an office that fits the description. So construction began last year. Reports say there are 100 cranes working at the site, 100 cranes. There are warning signs around it. Photographs are not allowed here, nor can you fly drones near the site. Access to the area has been completely blocked. Checkpoints have been installed to restrict the movement of people. This is an area through which people used to go hiking, but now those routes have been shut. China has been actively trying to hide this project, but now it's all over the headlines, which should not be surprising. Because when you're building a facility that is 10 times bigger than the Pentagon, someone will eventually find out. This project, its size, scale and scope, reflects China's military ambitions. Beijing wants to challenge America's military might. China already has the world's biggest military, with the highest number of active military personnel. The PLA has 2 million active troops. It also commands the world's largest naval fleet. China is closing the gap in the air as well, with new 6th-generation fighter jets. It is also expanding its nuclear arsenal. Beijing is building more nukes. The US sees this as a growing threat. It predicts that China will have 1,500 warheads by 2035, which is the same number as the United States. And this new facility is part of those same military upgrades. It was a missing piece for the PLA. It will serve as a centralized hub with new and advanced command and control systems. Military operations can be coordinated from here, that too across different branches of the PLA, as well as the theater commands. More importantly, if there is a nuclear attack, this facility will protect China's leadership. Now, we don't know what kind of arrangement they already have in place for something like this, but nothing comes close to the size and scale of the Beijing Military City. It is large enough to protect the entire command and control structure of the Chinese state. And it is China's rivalry with the United States that is driving this project. But India should not ignore this either. It cannot ignore China's rapid military advancements. Unlike the US, India's military challenge from China is more immediate. India shares a border with China, a disputed border which witnessed a military clash barely 5 years ago. India must take note of China's build-up and plan aggressive military upgrades. Perhaps tomorrow's budget will address this urgent need.
I rise to lay on the table a copy each of the following papers: the Economic Survey 24-25 Statistical Appendix,
The budget fever has gripped India. Tomorrow is the first full budget of Modi 3.0, and it's a big one. We've got a protectionist Trump in the White House, an economic slowdown at home, and a middle class clamoring for tax cuts. But that's all for tomorrow. Today was about the economic survey. It's basically a document prepared by the Finance Ministry, sort of like a report card. It looks at your strengths, your weaknesses, your targets, and your achievements. Today, the 2025 economic survey was tabled in India's parliament. We're going to break it down for you with the top 10 highlights. Number 1, GDP projections and targets. Growth in the next fiscal year is expected to be between 6.3 and 6.8%. That's from April 2025 to March 2026. Let's put that number in context. We will likely end this fiscal year at 6.4%. The year before was 8.2%. The next year will be 6.3 to 6.8%. Is that enough for our current target? The answer is no. The government wants to turn India into a developed country by 2047. And for that, growth must be 8%. You need 8% growth for a decade or two. That's what the economic survey says. Highlight number 2, the status of inflation. Prices are expected to cool in this quarter, especially with the seasonal easing of vegetable prices. Plus, the new harvests will reach the market soon. So overall, inflation is projected to fall. Highlight number 3, the job market. This year's economic survey paints a positive picture. It says unemployment has consistently fallen in India from 6% in 2017-18 to 3.2% in the last fiscal year. But the job is not done yet. India must create 7.85 million non-farm jobs every year. Almost 8 million jobs. Only then can we satisfy this growing population. Highlight number 4 is infrastructure. The government has made big bets on infra projects like roads, tunnels and ports, but the survey says the government alone cannot keep it up. The private sector needs to up its game. Let me quote from what it says. India needs a continued step up of infrastructure investment over the next 2 decades to sustain a high rate of growth. Quite clearly, public sector efforts cannot fully meet these requirements. Private participation should accelerate in many critical infrastructure sectors in many ways. Which brings us to highlight number 5, deregulation and reforms. This talks about removing unnecessary government rules, about unleashing the private sector. Again, let me quote from what the survey says. Getting out of the way and allowing businesses to focus on their core mission is a significant contribution that governments around the country can make to foster innovation and enhance competitiveness. That's a very clear message to the government. Get out of the way. Let the private sector do its thing. Highlight number 6 is artificial intelligence. There's a big chapter dedicated to AI, and it strikes a mixed note. The survey admits that AI's impact on India's labor market will be magnified, mainly because our per capita income is low, and a lot of our jobs are low-skilled. So what is the solution? To transition towards medium or high-skilled jobs, those that will not be replaced by AI. If that happens, we could reap a number of benefits. So the economic survey's advice is clear: upskill to protect our job market from artificial intelligence. Highlight number 7 is wages and working hours. The survey says Indian corporate profits are at a 15-year high, but wages have lagged. They want this imbalance corrected. The survey gives the example of Japan after the Second World War, how their companies shared profits with workers. This balance is crucial to rapid growth. Equally important is working hours. A lot of industry titans have weighed in on this. They have called for 90 and 70 hours per week. But the Economic Survey of India has hit back. It says 60 hours is the ideal working time. Spending too much time at your desk can harm your mental health. It's a timely clarification by the government. Next is highlight number 8, a war on junk food. The survey has proposed a higher tax on ultra-processed junk food or food items, sort of like a health tax. This would make things like fries or ice creams more expensive. The idea is to discourage their consumption. It also wants strict rules on labeling. Right now, a lot of ultra-processed foods are mislabeled. I'll give you some examples. Sugar-packed cereals are often labeled as healthy breakfast. Even children's drinks are labeled as healthy, though most of them are packed with sugar. The goal is to crack down on that, to make sure that people know what they are eating. Now we come to the last 2 highlights. Both of these cover India's external challenges. Highlight number 9 is China. Last year's economic survey was optimistic on China. It called for more Chinese investments in India. But this time, it's more of a warning. The survey notes that India is dependent on China for key products like solar panels, electric vehicles, and critical minerals. It also flags China's manufacturing prowess. They make up around 45% of global manufacturing. That is more than the US and its allies put together. So the economic survey's message is clear. India needs to diversify its options. Either produce at home or find more sellers elsewhere. Which brings us to the final highlight. A word on Donald Trump's tariffs and rising protectionism.
First, we have a list of...
Again, it calls for a mixed response. The survey suggests that tariffs should be rationalized. But it also reaffirms the importance of tariffs. It cites the example of the US and Britain in the last centuries. The survey says the US did not catch up with free trade or open markets. They caught up using tariffs. So India should also use this tool, but use it wisely. Those are the big highlights from India's economic survey this year. The biggest takeaway is probably reforms. Reduce the roadblocks, ease the business rules, and unleash the private sector. And make sure you tune into Firstpost for our special budget coverage tomorrow. We'll be tracking the finance minister's speech in the morning, the key announcements, the big policy changes, and the major reactions. Also, don't miss the special budget edition of Vantage at 9 p.m. tomorrow.
To be clear, are you saying race or gender played a role in this tragedy?
It may have, I don't know. Incompetence might have played a role. Well, please, go ahead.
The US is still reeling from Wednesday's tragedy, a mid-air collision in Washington, D.C. It was deadly. We showed you the pictures yesterday. A US military helicopter and a passenger plane crashed into each other. People do not walk out of crashes like that, and that seems to be the case here too. 67 people were on board both the aircraft. 53 bodies have been recovered from the area, but 14 victims are yet to be found. As we speak, the rescue efforts are underway. It is focused on DC's Potomac River. When something like this happens, the first question usually is how? How can a chopper and plane crash? Did they not see each other? Well, officials are investigating that. They have recovered a black box from both aircraft. In fact, 2 black boxes from each aircraft. And they have flight data and cockpit recordings. Hopefully that will reveal some details. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has his own theories. He held a press conference yesterday. It started off on a somber note, but soon he veered into politics. Trump blamed diversity hires for this collision.
DEI and the claims that you've made, are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power, you have to go by psychological quality.
That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level.
So Trump is blaming DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a policy aimed at addressing inequality. The idea is to hire more people from marginalized groups. In the US, that could mean the black community, or the LGBTQ community, or the Native American community. But President Trump opposes this policy. He says it has eroded merit in the US government. Now, there is no proof to back this claim, but DEI has become an ideological issue nowadays. The left supports it, the right opposes it, and Trump is blaming DEI for virtually everything. Look at his social media post on Wednesday. Trump blamed DEI for rising inflation. He said the central bank was too busy with woke ideas, so they forgot to tackle inflation. Before that, it was the Los Angeles wildfire. Trump's ally Elon Musk peddled this theory. He said DEI at the fire department led to a poor response. He said DEI means you die. Some Trump supporters also blamed the LA mayor, a black woman named Karen Bass. They branded her an inefficient DEI hire. Last May, there was another incident. A container ship crashed into a bridge in Baltimore. Again, Republicans blamed DEI because the Baltimore Port Commissioner was a black woman. The strategy is pretty clear. If you blame DEI, you don't have to take any responsibility. Plus, you can defame an opposition policy. It's not just dangerous, it is also a double standard. Trump says people with disabilities are being hired at the aviation regulator. He blamed Joe Biden and Barack Obama for it. But guess who started this policy? It was Trump himself. Back in 2019, he opened the aviation regulator to people with disabilities. And now he's blaming it for the crash. Just classic Trump things. It's almost like a flashback into his first term, especially yesterday's press conference. It was his first after taking office again. That background, that podium, all of it takes you back to the pandemic. Back then, President Trump would give daily press conferences, a mix of fake news, fake science, and rhetoric. And he's not changing that approach, which has left White House stenographers disappointed. These are people who transcribe the president's remarks, and they have a complaint. They say Trump simply won't stop talking. He spoke 22,000 words on Inauguration Day, 22,000 words, and 17,000 when he visited Los Angeles. Now, to put that in context, an average novel is around 70,000 words. Basically, 3 busy days for Donald Trump. Apparently, the White House is looking to hire more people because they cannot keep up with the president, especially after working for Joe Biden for 4 years. With Biden, they probably faced a different challenge, decoding size and gibberish. With Trump, it's probably more about transcribing with a straight face, especially when he says stuff like this.
In that process, we identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza to buy condoms for Hamas. 50 million. And you know what's happened to them? They've used them as a method of making bombs. How about that?
Just to be clear, there is no basis of this statement. There is no fact here. The U.S. has not spent $50 million on Hamas, but this is the Trump White House. The focus is not on facts, it is on rhetoric. Now let's talk about Kash Patel, the Indian American who could be the next FBI chief. Trump supporters in India are celebrating his nomination. Patel himself highlighted his Indian roots yesterday during his confirmation hearing. He greeted his parents in Gujarati and said Jai Shri Krishna. Democrats, however, were not impressed. They oppose Patel's nomination. They see him as a conspiracy theorist and a Trump loyalist. They believe he will use his position to target Trump's political rivals. Patel himself has published a list of 60 enemies. That's what he calls them, enemies. He has singled out what he calls members of the deep state. Kash Patel says they deserve to be punished. Many of these so-called enemies are those who investigated Trump's actions during his last term in office. Will this affect Kash Patel's confirmation? Our next report has more.
When Kash Patel walked into the Senate hall, all eyes were on him. And that was no surprise. His reputation precedes him. Kash Patel is a son of Indian immigrants. He's a lawyer by training and a former government prosecutor. Patel rose to prominence during Trump's first term. He was a key advisor to the current president and a trusted figure. Now, as a reward for his loyalty, Trump has picked him to lead the FBI. To get the job, Patel needs to be confirmed by American lawmakers, which brings us to the hearing. As Patel faced questions from the lawmakers, his family was there rooting for him.
I'd like to welcome my father, Pramod, and my mother, Anjana, who are sitting here today. They traveled here to get here from India. My sister's also here, Nisha. She also traversed the oceans just to be with me here today. It means the world that you guys are here. Jesse Krishna.
The Democrats grilled Patel in the most aggressive fashion.
you understand what I'm asking you. Can you say the words, Joe Biden won the 2020 election?
Joe Biden was the President of the United States.
You understand this? There's a difference. I can say the words, Donald Trump won. I don't like to say it, but I must say it. And you cannot say that Joe Biden won the election.
Both of their elections were certified, and they are both, one was and one now is president.
Okay.
Patel couldn't have been more direct, but his responses weren't good enough for the Democrats. They have reasons to cast doubts. Kash Patel has a history of pushing conspiracy theories. He's supposed to be leading the FBI. In the past, he has called the agency's top brass crooks and gangsters. In his memoir, Government Gangster, he's proposed firing these officials. His book features a so-called enemies list. It has 60 names, which includes former President Joe Biden, former Attorney General Merrick Garland, and former National Security Advisor John Bolton. Patel has called them members of the deep state.
This book, Government Gangsters, I urge all of you to read before you cast a vote for this gentleman. Mr. Patel has published at the back of this book a list of 60 people whom he calls, quote, members of the deep state. 60.
The Democrats say Patel will go after these so-called enemies once he's director of the FBI. But he says he won't pursue politically motivated cases.
Due process must be provided without bias to all Americans. And if we cannot provide due process to the worst, then there can be no due process for anyone, and our constitutional republic fails.
Kash Patel was also grilled over the January 6th insurrection and Trump's decision to pardon 1,600 rioters. In the past, Patel has supported these rioters by calling them political prisoners and even raising funds for them.
Was President Donald Trump wrong to give blanket clemency to the January 6 defendants?
I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
So do you think that America is safer because these 1,600 people have been given an opportunity to come out of serving their sentences and live in our communities again?
Senator, I have not looked at all 1,600 individual cases. I have always advocated for imprisoning those that cause harm to our law enforcement and civilian communities.
However, during the hearing, Patel appeared to shift his position. The heated exchanges make for good political drama, but they are unlikely to derail Patel's confirmation. The Democrats are in minority in the Senate, and the Republicans haven't opposed his nomination. For now, it looks like Patel's confirmation is all but certain.
Our next story is about Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, the tech giant behind Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. This is a man who's built an empire on knowing everything about you, your favorite food, your high school crush, the exact moment you're tempted to impulse shop. Zuckerberg knows all of it. He commands the world's biggest personal data harvesting machine, and yet suddenly he cares about privacy. Why? Because this time his own words were leaked. On Thursday, Mark Zuckerberg held Meta's first all-hands meeting of 2025. Employees submitted questions. Zuckerberg answered all of them. The main themes were the layoffs, the end of DEI at Meta. DEI, as you know, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Donald Trump has declared war on it, so Meta is scrapping it. Which brings us to the next agenda item. Working with President Donald Trump, that was discussed. Zuckerberg's controversial masculine energy comments were also in focus. TikTok's dominance, the benefits of DeepSeek, and even remote work. Mark Zuckerberg addressed all of this. And his message to employees? Buckle up. 2025 will be intense. But there's one topic he just wouldn't let go of. Leaks. That's right, Zuckerberg is fed up with people spilling his secrets. Here's what he said, and I have his quote. Everything I say leaks, and it sucks, right? I want to be able to talk about stuff openly, but I'm also trying to, we're trying to build stuff and create value in the world, not destroy value by talking about stuff that inevitably leaks. So to sum it up, Zuckerberg is angry. Everything he says gets leaked. So he decided to address the leaking problem, and ironically, that got leaked too. Meta, of course, was not laughing about it. Shortly after this, the company sent a memo to staff stressing that leaks were a serious issue, that staffers involved would be fired, and that Meta would not tolerate this breach of trust. Do you know what's even funnier? That memo got leaked too. It's starting to look like Zuckerberg can control the metaverse, but not his own office. Now, leaks in any company are a big deal. Internal discussions are meant to stay internal. When trust breaks, it creates an atmosphere of paranoia. Who's talking? Who's listening? Who's next? But Meta's leaks are not just office gossip gone rogue. This is about something bigger. Mark Zuckerberg has run Meta in a particular way for years, positioning himself as a liberal tech leader. He's championed inclusivity. He's pushed fact-checking. He played the role of a responsible tech CEO. But since November last year, there's been a complete U-turn, and the reason is Donald Trump. Zuckerberg is now echoing Trump's language, prioritizing business over ideology. And while that may keep Meta safe in a Trump-led America, it is backfiring inside the company. Employees are quietly revolting, and these leaks are their way of fighting back. But beyond company politics, there's a bigger story at play. For years, Meta has tracked users across apps, harvested their personal data, built an advertising empire worth billions of that data. In 2022 alone, Meta raked in nearly $113 billion from ads. It's a business model built on knowing everything about you. And yet here we are. Zuckerberg is now complaining about his privacy being violated. Why? Because no one warned him that even he could be a victim. At best, it is poetic justice. At worst, it's just another day at Meta. And you can see why. Big tech may have our attention, but it does not have our trust. Let me show you the survey of American teens. Nearly 50% say they do not trust big tech, companies like Google, Meta, TikTok. 64% young people believe big tech does not care about their mental health. 62% say that companies won't protect their safety. 53% say that these companies are not ethical. So American teens do not trust these tech giants. And can you blame them? When the Meta CEO cannot keep his own secrets safe, what can he do with ours? Also, this is not just about leaks, it's about control. Mark Zuckerberg built a company that knows everything about everyone. But now he's realizing what it feels like. Maybe, just maybe, he'll start to understand why the rest of us have been concerned all along. But if history has taught us anything, don't hold your breath. Have you heard of the fable, The Fox and the Grapes? Here's how it goes. A fox spots a bunch of ripe grapes hanging high above. He wants to taste them. So the fox leaps and strives, each time failing to reach the grapes. Agitated, the fox gives up and walks away. He says the grapes are sour anyway, so he doesn't want them. This convenient assumption is meant to make him feel better about his own failing. And now we're seeing this story play out in the world of technology, where China's DeepSeek is a bunch of grapes and the West is the fox. They've been complaining about these sour grapes. First, they questioned DeepSeek's abilities. Then they raised suspicions about surveillance. Some even went on about data privacy and played the ethics card. But now the fox's true intentions are out. He doesn't just want to get the grapes, he wants to squash them. The West wants DeepSeek out of the picture, and they've closed ranks to achieve it. Leading the pack is the United States. It is probing how DeepSeek got NVIDIA chips in the first place. Like we've said before, DeepSeek built its AI models without top-tier hardware, no cutting-edge technology, and yet they delivered. The models were powered by less advanced NVIDIA chips, the H800 chips. They were permitted for sale to China until 2023. After that, the US banned their sale. It also restricted sales of other advanced chips to China. So how did Beijing get them? Washington wants answers. It is digging deep and tracing the supply chain. One possible path is Singapore. The US now wants to know if Chinese companies secured these chips through Singaporean firms. And while this investigation is on, Trump's Commerce Secretary, the Commerce Secretary Pick, is making some big accusations. He says DeepSeek leveraged US chips, that it stole US intellectual property.
I do not believe that DeepSeek was done all above board. That's nonsense. Okay? They stole things, they broke in, they've taken our IP. It's got to end. And I'm going to be rigorous in our pursuit of restrictions and enforcing those restrictions to keep us in the lead, because we must stay in the lead.
So the US wants restrictions, but someone forgot to CC the Pentagon on this memo. The Pentagon is the US Defense Ministry. Its workers were caught using DeepSeek, and they did it on their work computers, essentially connecting them to Chinese servers. And this continued for 2 whole days. When the Pentagon found out, they banned the use of DeepSeek, but the damage could already be done. Ironic, right? Maybe the real threat to US security is not Chinese AI, maybe it is the US itself. And while Washington is mulling curbs, Italy has gone a step ahead and banned it. The app is not available on app stores in Italy. They're citing privacy concerns. Italy's data watchdog is concerned about the private data of citizens. It wasn't convinced by DeepSeek's policies, hence the ban. The app can still be accessed in the country, though, using VPNs, that's virtual private networks. Now, other countries are also raising the alarm, the likes of South Korea and Ireland. They want to question the Chinese company on user data. Australia's science minister also raised privacy concerns, so the knives are out. But let's get one thing straight. This is not about privacy. This is not about protecting user data. This is about protecting Western tech supremacy. Because if they care so much about user privacy, how come American big tech is still collecting user data? How are their social media platforms still tracking people? How were Western AI models allowed to scrape every corner of the web to train their systems? Where was the scrutiny then? So this whole spiel about privacy is just an excuse. This essentially is about control. The West cannot accept the fact that China outsmarted them. First they dismissed it, now they want to destroy it. Will DeepSeek survive this pressure? Or will it be the next sour grape crushed by global politics? One thing's for sure, the AI battle has only begun, and this time the fox is not walking away from the bunch of grapes, it is coming for the entire vine. Our next story is about space, the final frontier. It's a place India hopes to send its own astronauts to with the upcoming Gaganyaan missions. But before that, one of the Gaganyaan crew members is making a test run. On board an American mission to the ISS, the International Space Station, Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla from the Indian Air Force has been shortlisted. He has been chosen to pilot a private space mission. Group Captain Shukla will become just the second Indian in space 41 years after this feat was first achieved. Here's our report.
This is Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla. He's an active service member of the Indian Air Force. He is a test pilot with over 2,000 flight hours and experience piloting everything from a Su-30 MKI to Jaguar bombers and even the AN-32 military transport craft. Group Captain Shukla has flown them all. But his next flight will still be a unique experience because he has been chosen to pilot a rocket ship. Group Captain Shukla will be the pilot for an upcoming mission to the International Space Station. He was tapped by the Indian Space Research Organisation, ISRO, back in 2019, along with Group Captain Prashant Balakrishnan Nair, Group Captain Angad Pratap, and Group Captain Ajit Krishnan. These 4 IAF pilots were chosen for India's own manned space mission, the Gaganyaan 4, which is scheduled for no sooner than 2026. There's still at least a year left for that, so India wanted the Gaganyaan crew to get some additional experience in the meantime. That's why ISRO picked Group Captain Shukla for an American space mission. He's being sponsored by the Indian government. It's almost a warm-up before India's own manned space enterprise. Group Captain Shukla will go to space sometime this spring, alongside 3 other astronauts. The mission is being carried out by Axiom. It's an American private space company. This will be their fourth private space flight to the International Space Station. Axiom will use a SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft to transport the astronauts. They will be launched on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. The astronauts are expected to spend 14 days aboard the ISS. The crew had a press conference yesterday. They outlined what they would be doing. Group Captain Shukla will pilot the craft, but once they get to the station, he said he has his own agenda as well. To capture his experiences on board the ISS through pictures and videos, and share them with all the Bharatvasis back home. He said that his mission was also the journey of 1.4 billion people.
I'm not at liberty to give out all the information right now, but I can assure you that we will have a lot of stuff that will represent the regions in particular and India in general, which I will be taking up to the station. That would be honoring my country.
The mission commander is an American astronaut, Peggy Whitson. She holds the record for the most time spent in space by a woman and by any American. The other two crew members are mission specialists from Hungary and from Poland. The two specialists share something in common with Group Captain Shukla. They are also just the second people from their countries going to space. India, Poland and Hungary all sent one astronaut into space back in the 1970s and 80s. But that's it. All three nations haven't returned since. Now, after more than 40 years, all three nations will have their second spacefarers. Group Captain Shukla is 39 years old. He was born the year after India sent its first astronaut to space. Or perhaps we should say cosmonaut. The first Indian in space was Wing Commander Kash Sharma. He went to space in a Soyuz-T space capsule, courtesy the Soviet Union. The 1984 Soyuz T-11 mission was the first time an Indian citizen reached the stars. Wing Commander Sharma is still involved with India's space endeavors. He's in touch with Group Captain Shukla, who regards him as a mentor. After this, India will have the Gaganyaan missions, hopefully paving the way for even more Indians in space.
Now let's turn to Africa, to the conflict in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This week, the M23 rebel group took over the city of Goma. It's the capital of the DRC's mineral-rich North Kivu province. Since it's an active conflict zone, casualty numbers have been hard to come by. The World Health Organization says that 45 people have been killed and more than 2,000 have been injured over the past week, but the real figures could be much higher. Hospitals in the region have been overwhelmed by the number of injured.
The current situation is chaotic. In 3 days, we have received more than 400 injured people. From January to today, we have more than 1,000 injured. For a hospital with an initial capacity of 146 beds, we currently have more than 200 injured in hospital.
M23 is consolidating its hold on Goma. After 2 days of street fighting, traffic is being seen on the roads. Shops are open again, but the unease is evident.
The people who control the city now have allowed for normalcy to return. That is why you see a lot of activity all around from everyone. They have told us to return back to business, and we have followed their instructions.
Despite the order to get things going again, problems persist. Thousands have been displaced. Goma does not have water and electricity. People are resorting to taking water from the nearby Lake Kivu, carrying it back in jerry cans.
The situation is not good, and we are suffering a lot because of the lack of water. Since the war started, everything has been cut off. The water has been cut off. No electricity, no water. We come too far to get water here at the lake. If there's a possibility that those who are already in the city could help us get water, that would help.
Goma always had it tough. It has been in the middle of a conflict zone for decades. The M23 rebels had actually captured the city before, back in 2012, but they had withdrawn after a few days. This time they plan to stay. The rebel group is casting itself as a liberation force.
We found a wounded city, a city of greats, traumatized, fearful, a chaotic situation that has been ongoing for years, caused by the cowardice and recklessness of the illegitimate and incompetent regime.
That is the leader of the Congo Rebel Alliance. It's an umbrella group comprising a number of militant factions. This includes the M23. The leader you just saw, he's a former DRC election commissioner. I'm not joking. He actually certified the elections in the country back in 2018. Now he has taken command of a militant alliance, fighting against a man he once certified as president. The M23 rebels call President Felix Tshisekedi illegitimate and incompetent. And they're threatening to oust him by marching all the way to the country's capital, Kinshasa.
We are here in Goma to stay as Congolese and to protect the population against threats. We will continue the march of liberation all the way to Kinshasa.
But Tshisekedi is not backing down. He made a defiant speech on Wednesday and called for a massive military mobilization. His speech seems to have inspired thousands in the DRC. These are the visuals coming in from Bukavu. It's a city near Goma in the neighboring South Kivu province. Bukavu is reportedly the next major target for the M23 rebels, but locals there are lining up to enlist in the military and fight against the rebel group.
We will use all the means at our disposal, all the resources we have, to end this war. It will be long, but we will win, rain or shine. I believe the enemy, Rwanda, and its allies, will be too small for their big shoes because we are starting now, right now. We are starting the mobilization and we are calling on the entire Congolese population, all the young citizens who follow us now, whether in Europe, in America, to join this mobilization.
As you just heard, they consider Rwanda their real enemy. Rwanda neighbors the DRC. It is just across from the North and South Kivu provinces, and the country is accused of backing the M23 rebels. Rwanda has always denied this, but most nations are directly talking to Rwanda's president, Paul Kagame. They want him to call off the M23 rebels. The latest leader to wade into the issue is South Africa's president, Cyril Ramaphosa. South African peacekeepers are stationed in the DRC. At least 13 of them have been killed amid the fighting. President Ramaphosa declared this on social media. His post was not taken well by Paul Kagame. The Rwandan president put up this response. His last point looks like a threat. This is what he said, and I'm quoting. If South Africa wants to contribute to peaceful solutions, that is well and good, but South Africa is in no position to take on the role of a peacekeeper, peacemaker or mediator. And if South Africa prefers confrontation, Rwanda will deal with the matter in that context any day. The DRC conflict is on the verge of escalating and potentially spilling over. In fact, this has happened before. The DRC was the stage for the Second Congo War in the late 1900s. It was also known as Africa's World War. Multiple neighboring armies fought inside what is now the DRC, and the legacy of that war is the state of the DRC and Goma today. The last thing we need is a repeat of that brutal conflict. No one does counterfeits like China. You can find cheap copies of almost anything, even the things that should probably not be copied, like animals. But a Chinese zoo has done just that. They have made counterfeits of tigers. Do you know how? By painting furry dogs orange and giving them stripes. So instead of hearing a roar, zoo goers will have to settle for a bark. It is outrageous for barking out loud. But this is not the first instance of its kind. Here's a report.
A tiger does not father a dog. This is a famous Chinese idiom. And recently it got a new twist, thanks to a rough sell, pardon the pun. Because maybe, just maybe, a dog can be a tiger. At least that's what a zoo in China's Taizhou city believes. It painted 2 dogs orange with black stripes and presented them as tigers. And now it has run into controversy. A video of the animals has gone viral on Chinese social media. It has sparked massive outrage because people can tell that the animals are obviously not tigers. They are chow chows, the furry Spitz breed that is native to China. These dogs are supposed to be white, but instead they are sporting the animal print. After the massive backlash, the zoo has apologized. It also claims to have marketed the animals as dog tigers and not tiger tigers, so apparently that's good enough. But this isn't the first instance of this bizarre creativity. A number of Chinese zoos are caught up in fake animal scandals, and somehow chow chows are almost always at the center of it. In September last year, a zoo in Guangdong province paraded 2 dogs as pandas. It painted black spots on the dogs. After relentless quizzing by local media, it was forced to admit that the pandas were in fact dogs. Before that, in the month of May, a zoo in Jiangsu province sparked fury. It too dyed small chow chow dogs to look like pandas. Clearly, some dogs are born to be guards, some are born to be lap dogs, but it seems Chinese chow chows are meant to be counterfeits. Well, that's just China being China, and for the most part, this is quite funny. But at the same time, it also raises concerns. The zoos embroiled in scandals have made all kinds of claims. They say that they resort to such measures because they don't have actual zoo-like animals for visitors to see. They also claim that the animals are dyed in a humane way. But animal rights groups have slammed the zoos, accusing them of animal cruelty for selfish reasons. As per reports, the zoos shave the dog's fur and dye the skin to turn the chow chows into fake pandas. Then these dogs are forced to be caged quite literally. Rights groups say that this animal cruelty is as black and white as a panda. But guess that's the price you have to pay in China, whether with artificial intelligence or with zoo animals. A tiger may not change its stripes, but all the non-tigers have to just paint them on.
Louis Vuitton, Dior, Fendi, Tiffany & Co. You must have heard of these brands. They all belong to LVMH. That's the parent company. It's a luxury conglomerate. And it is run by this man, Bernard Arnault. He is the CEO of LVMH. He is the world's 5th richest man, and this is his net worth, $190 billion. We'll come back to that later, but first, let's talk about his recent call. This week, the world's 5th richest person got on a call with the world's 3rd richest person, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, and the two men discussed layoffs. You see, recently, Meta announced plans to lay off 5% employees, that's roughly 3,600 people, whom Zuckerberg calls low performers. They will be fired soon. Arnault reacted to this. He said that the people getting laid off are actually, and I'm quoting, being promoted outwards. That's what he said. Promoted outwards. Remember, this is the LVMH top boss. His wealth combined with Musk is about $420 billion. He's talking about people losing their livelihoods in an instant, and he's calling this turn of fate an outward promotion. What a way to make up a silver lining. This is not only cringy and infuriating, this is a case of gaslighting. And it's so out of touch. Every worker knows this. Yes, layoffs are an occupational hazard, but they're also among the most challenging life experiences. Studies show that they can cause more psychological stress than divorce. They can cause physical health issues. They can change family dynamics. They can alter your sense of self. Yes, layoffs affect different workers differently, but they can upend your life. And one thing can make it even worse. When a top boss, the world's fifth richest man, calls it an outward promotion. Like I said, it is cringy. But this is not just about Bernard Arnault or LVMH. We saw this with Salesforce as well, when the company laid off 8,000 staff, but their CEO took a 10-day trip to French Polynesia. He called it a digital detox. We saw this with Twitter too. It fired employees in the middle of the night by signing them out of company accounts. And who could forget Better.com CEO laying off 900 people over Zoom? These are different experiences, but they have something in common. They're all tone deaf. And you don't expect this from the business elite. Now, obviously, hashtag not all CEOs. And we get that being the boss is not easy. You have to take tough calls. You have to fire people. And this is a tricky area. There is no good way to tell someone that they are being let go. So there is a huge scope for faux pas. And this scope only increases as the disconnect grows. Bosses have always made more money than workers, but this gap between CEOs and employees is growing dramatically. In the US, top CEOs make about 200 times the salary of an average employee. In the UK, top executives earned more in the first week of this year than their average worker will all year. In India, the pay for IT CEOs has soared 160% in the last 5 years, while that of a fresher has risen by just 4%. And coming back to Arno, even if you make $10,000 a week, you would have to work every week for more than a third of a million years to come close to his net worth of $190 billion. That's about the same time since before Homo sapiens first emerged in Africa. So we get the disconnect. But this does not stop people from feeling the pinch. When you relate a layoff to a promotion, or when you dangle the layoff carrot to get what you want, Starbucks did it recently. It wanted to end work from home, so it warned employees, return to office or risk being fired. But their CEO doesn't have to. He doesn't have to return. He lives 14 hours away from the headquarters. He has a private jet given by the company for when he wants to show up in office. And he earns a base salary of $1.6 million. So if someone can survive a layoff for not showing up, it is him. But he doesn't have to worry about it. And that's exactly my point. CEOs live by different rules, by different standards. And you could say they deserve it. Of course, they worked for it. They run massive companies, but their offices are not ghost towns. Layoffs impact company sentiment, and a company depends on employee performance. This performance improves by keeping employees happy. Even an intern would know that. Happy, secure employees are profitable for companies, so it makes economic sense to handle layoffs with care. It also makes common sense. It is bad enough that companies call workers resources. But you cannot forget that they are human. Even if you cannot relate to a worker living paycheck to paycheck, you can have genuine human empathy for them while you're demanding work from them, and more so when you're letting them go. Are you ready for tomorrow's budget? If not, just memorize these 3 words: tax, GDP, inflation. Just throw them around in your tweets and comments. It's what most people do on social media nowadays. They become finance experts in budget season. But for the middle class, it's all about expectations, hoping for that elusive tax cut. Hundreds of millions of Indians will be waiting for that announcement tomorrow. Actually, scratch that. Only 2% Indians pay income tax anyway, so more like 20 million people, not hundreds of millions. Nonetheless, the expectations are huge, and so is the meme fest.
पोपट पे पोपट, पोपट पे पोपट, सब जगह मेरा पोपट हो रहा है।
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Thousands welcome freed Palestinian prisoners in Ramallah. Thousands of protesters clash with the police as the Istanbul mayor gets questioned in court amid a crackdown on Turkish opposition. And North Koreans mark the Lunar New Year with floral tributes. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1990, the first McDonald's opened in the Soviet Union. Hundreds lined up to try the Big Mac for the first time. Around 30,000 were served on the first day. It was a sign of the opening up of the Soviet Union. But 32 years later, in 2022, McDonald's left the country after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow for our special budget edition of Vantage. We're calling the show Vantage. We hope you like what we've put together for you. Touted as the minimum defense from that video. India's neighbors were the first to send the special edition of Vantage live from the White House throughout this week. Yes, Hindu Mandir we're on our way to Tel Aviv. Pretty measure, but it's also the perfect way to drive.
I don't think that
Prime Minister of Bhutan, Sherin Tagwe. Welcome to
60% of the world's
office. Prime Minister Modi did the iron.
We were actually
How are you doing? How do you like? It's been 1 year since that meeting. Iron bars separate you from the outside. Out the vote effort. Trump had, it says, and at $4.3 trillion. 300 billion by 2030. That's what we need to tackle climate change.